Warning. This will be talking about topics that might trigger you. Be aware before continuing on watching and listening to this episode. Thank you.
Hey everybody, welcome to another podcast, Paolo's podcast, our sister affiliate of concussion, pain, mental health awareness. And again, we're lucky to have one of the, in my opinion, one of the top psychologists in the country, Dr. Russell A. Bourne, who is not only on our board of directors as advisor and vice president of our non-for-profit, but also is my personal cognitive psychologist. So welcome back to us, Doc. And I'm going to start off with, going to jump right into it. And we're going to start asking some questions about a topic that I got some questions on. The audience that has been sending us some questions has been wanting to know for us to talk about SAD, seasonal adjustment disorder, that they're dealing with right now, and if they're going through depression, or I guess maybe you could discuss what seasonal adjustment disorder is, and some maybe generic coping skills to the audience, because I know you like to look somebody in the eye to really advise them on the situation. So I know I'm pushing you off of your comfort zone a little bit.
Okay. So SAD stands for, it's close to what you said, but it's seasonal affective disorder, meaning that there's a defect in one's ability to regulate their affect, right, their mood, that comes about because of a change in the season. Most of the time it happens during the winter months because daylight is less prevalent and people tend to go inside more because of cold weather. They tend to stay out of the sun. Of course, the sun is lower on the horizon, so it's cloudier and we don't have as many bright, full, clear blue sky days. If you live in Ohio, if you live in Chicago, if you live in the Midwest and above the Mason-Dixon line, you likely have very few consecutive pretty sky days where there's a lot of sunlight and there's some warmth so that you want to go outside. So seasonal affective disorder, a kind of mood regulation difficulty that seems to be associated primarily with winter months. Although some people experience it in the spring, summer, or fall months. That's why it's not called winter affective disorder, just seasonal. Coping strategies, if it happens to be during the winter months, is to be outside as often as you can be, right? Being out of doors seems to remind us of life in general. And so if there's any day where the temperature is manageable, bundle up, put on your sweater, put on your hat, all that heat's escaping through the head, and get outside, okay? Let's say you can't. Let's say it's cloudy, it's overcast, it's bitter cold, you have frostbite, you have thin skin, just going outside is not going to work for you, right? So there are full spectrum ultraviolet lights, which seem to be helpful for people. And they shine this light in their bedroom, shine it in their family room. That seems very useful for a lot of folks. Also, sometimes just looking at YouTube videos of sunny places. Go and look at Caribbean vacation videos, look at skiing vacation videos, Colorado, where the sun is up bright and you get the reflection off the snow. But something that reminds people that their world isn't as dreary and as sunless, as sparkleless as their current environment is, right? That's what I would suggest for them.
So I noticed that, and this was before my diagnosis, probably around when I was 15 or 16, I always got depressed around Christmas time and the New Year's. So it has nothing to do with actually a holiday effect, is more towards the lighting, because I still get it since I moved down to South Florida where the weather's 90%, it's beautiful out and it's great sunshine. It's just that energy. And I also related to when I was living in Miami, I was surrounded by a lot of concrete. and I wasn't getting that energy because of the concrete, where now when we move closer north, everything's greener, plants, and the water, I get that energy from the blue water, and it breaks me out of that cycle. So is there any correlation to what I'm describing to what you just described?
Well, so the environmental effect on our health is well established, right? We've talked about green spaces a lot in the press for the last decade, that people are better off take a walk in a park, go to the woods, be in green space. They now talk about blue space, meaning that we should be near water, be near fountains. That's why cities and their city parks are having fountains and ponds, and et cetera. But you also mentioned the sort of the Christmas blues, the holiday depression, so to speak, that some people feel. And that's sort of different than seasonal affective disorder. That's more psychological, where the SAD has a big physiological component. For some people, holidays are not a happy time. Maybe they didn't grow up in a household where it was stress-free during the holidays. It was more stressful during the holidays. People came in from out of town. Dad was grumpy because he didn't have enough money to feed all these people. Mom was disappointed she couldn't get Billy the bicycle and Sari the Susie, Chatty Cathy, whatever. And so there was a kind of an unhappiness in the household, sometimes because people couldn't do what they wanted to do for people as a gift. Sometimes people just, maybe their holiday experience when they were children or adolescents wasn't good, and it was hard for them to get into the mood of Christmas, right? So there could be all sorts of associational reasons for why people just don't feel that joyful Christmas or joyful holiday feeling that everybody wants to have. Everybody wants other people to have. Get in the spirit, they say, get in the giving, joyful spirit. Well, for some folks, holidays are just not associated with memories that were of giving, joyful times. And so it's hard for them to connect, right?
I don't know if this is my mind playing tricks on me or if it's an actual statistic. Is there statistics that like depression and suicide and maybe substance abuse goes up during the winter, during the certain seasons, or not? And which of those seasons would they be?
Right. So there's definitely an uptick in substance abuse anytime someone is trying to alter their mood, right, artificially. And so if there's an uptick in the holiday blues or in depression with the Christmas holidays, so to speak, winter holidays, then there would obviously be a corollary uptick in substance abuse, whether it's alcohol use or there's a movie, Parenthood, from years ago with Steve Martin. It's really very funny. And Jason Robards plays the father, and Steve Martin is the adult son, and he's having struggles with his 10 or 12-year-old little boy. And part of the film takes place during the Christmas season. And Steve Martin, as the adult son, goes to Jason Robards, the father, and says, I don't understand how you managed to get through all the seasons with all the Christmases with their 4 of us kids, and the in-laws came in, and I don't know how you did it. And he says, I always had my friend Jack who came over and helped me. And Steve Martin says, Jack? I don't remember any friend named Jack that you had. He goes, oh, Jack Daniels. He always showed up.
I remember that line.
Yeah, he helped me get through all these holidays, right? So some people turn, their coping skill is to numb or dull down their emotional response. So they use a sedative. Alcohol is a sedative. And that's how they get through. They don't have the stress or worry because they dull themselves down. So, it's better to know where these sad feelings or unhappy feelings are coming from than it is to try to dull them down or escape from them. And so the coping strategies, some ways, are to say, where'd they originate, if we can figure that out. And then, you're not there now. You're not the 12-year-old boy now. You're not the 16-year-old girl now. You're not the 25-year-old boy now, right? And so to find out where they came from and to remind people to stay in the present now and not to let their past be such a determinant of their mood today.
Okay, so would the coping skill be still what you said with SAD for those issues? Because we don't want them to self-medicate and reach for that mood stabilizer. Would the same suggestion be to get outside to distract the mind? And does that help relieve the dopamine, or is that the serotonin? I'm sorry.
So being out of doors and in the environment is helpful anytime as a coping strategy. If someone is anxious and they walk around the block and they tend to what they see, right? They are taking their mind out of whatever the worry or anxiety or apprehensive feeling is. Look, how many different colored flowers do you see? What are the different shapes of the leaves? How tall are the bushes? Where does the light come through the palm fronds? How does the light shine on this house different than the other house? Any of those kinds of, just go outside and observe and ask yourself question after question after question as you walk around the block. Whose yard seems larger? What grass blade seems darker green? Just anything that sort of takes you away from this repetitive thought in your head about what you're frightened, scared, nervous, worried, sad over. Okay.
So now I guess that could actually pivot into depression. So is it a responsible suggestion for anyone that is going through that down or the blues or whatever we want label we want to throw onto it? The worst thing we could do is isolate, right? Is that a safe thought? Saying is, like you just said, is get out, move, look at the grass, look at the flowers, smell the roses, is the worst thing we could do if we're in that dark period, even though we feel comfortable, like myself, want to be in that dark room and don't want to be bothered, is not to force yourself to get out of that room and change your locations, correct?
I think so.
Right.
No,
I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No. I think you've done a nice job of summarizing it. I think it's a very useful strategy to be with other people. Now, if, as you've told other folks some of your history, so you've mentioned migraine headaches and difficulty. Anyone who's ever had a migraine headache or has a friend or a family member with a migraine headache, for them, isolation is curative, or at least it's a strong therapeutic agent. They don't need light, they don't need sound, they don't need bother. They need to be alone and let their central nervous system calm down, right? Let the brain waves calm down. And sometimes medication is absolutely important. But if someone has depression, even if it's serious depression, even if it's marginally suicidal feelings of depression, someone has anxiety, even if it's serious anxiety, marginal or full panic attack anxiety, being by themselves, being isolated and alone is hardly ever going to be therapeutic. Okay. So being with another person if you're having a panic attack is helpful. Being with another person if you're depressed is helpful. Now, a depressed person might say, I don't feel like being around happy people. I'm sad. I'm unhappy. All that's going to do is remind me of what I don't have and what I'm not experiencing. My response to that is, it may do that, but it may do much more than that. You're right. That is a risk, that you'll look outside of yourself and say, why are all those people happy and I'm not? And then what's the next question? Well, what are those people doing that I'm not? What's the next question? How did those people get to do that way? And so all of a sudden you're now problem solving. You're asking yourself questions rather than just saying, I'm sad and depressed and I don't have a good life. Be with other people, right? Everything becomes a little different once we get it out of ourselves. Everything, once we speak it, it becomes a little different. Once we get out of our head, it becomes a little different. Everything becomes a little different when we speak it out loud or we do it in action.
Okay, that's great advice. Now, since we're in unusual times, and hopefully I'm framing this question right, we're dealing with obviously, the pandemic and the virus. So people are being isolated. I just left my grandmother the other day. She's 100 years old, and she was talking, she's depressed, she's because she's under quarantine, she doesn't get the same visitors, her dementia is starting to advance a little bit because she doesn't see the regular people on a regular basis. So is there anything that I'm thinking, I'm blessed. I still have my mother and father and my sister in my life, and I have you in my life and other friends. But not everyone's so fortunate to have, a large group of support system where someone is hopefully reaching out to our campaign. This is one of the goals that we have to put in place, is that if you are isolated, what can you do if you don't have that support system, so we don't go darker in these troubling times?
Right. So
That's a rough question, right?
Well, it's just a serious risk. This isolation, the self-imposed or government-sanctioned quarantining and isolation carries with it a huge psychological risk. And as you said, we're seeing some of the consequences of it. There are people who otherwise were quite able to manage their mood swings, whether they swung towards being anxious or apprehensive about life, or they swung more towards being sad, pessimistic, depressed about life. They mostly managed it. Now they don't have a way to manage it. Why? Because they're stuck at home. Your question a few minutes ago was, is it fair to say that isolation is lousy no matter what the situation psychologically? Is it fair to say isolation is a damaging condition in the situation? Yes, we see it right now with the pandemic. Isolation is nearly always damaging. So we have to help these folks, have contact. Do they have to have it face to face? Well, you and I are face to face right now, but we're not personal. We are personal, but we're not in each other's space. But we are in each other's space. I'm looking at you in your space. You're looking at me in my space. We're talking real time. So FaceTime and Zoom and whatever the other ones are, Skype, those are magnificent tools for people right now. I think a lot of folks aren't using them. I think a lot of people could FaceTime their sister, their brother, their grandchildren, their friend from high school, and they're not doing it. I am suggesting almost daily, why aren't you making a phone call with a video compliment? You tell me you call your sister once a week. Why aren't you FaceTiming your sister twice a week? Right? So this is a less artificial way than people think. I know that I can't sense you, but I do, because I know you, so I can feel. So it's important that we take advantage of this fabulous technology that lets us be with someone who's miles and miles and miles away, so we don't feel isolated. One of the things that's happening is that, and I hear this from people, and actually I think it's profound. I didn't have this thought on my own. The patient shared it with me this way. And they said, I'm not really so worried about when the world gets back to normal. I'm worried about whether I'm ever going to get back to normal, right? Now that's a powerful statement. I'm worried if I'm ever going to feel comfortable again going out to malls or going to see people. I'm worried if maybe I'm getting a little too comfortable being alone and isolated and not having to share my thoughts, not having to interact and ask people their thoughts. I'm worried about me. Am I ever going to get back to normal again? I mean, that's a scary thought, right? So this pandemic, as soon as the vaccine comes around, we're going to all breathe deeply and say how wonderful, but it's going to be a while before people get out of these very bad habits of, I'm okay on my own, when they know they aren't. Okay.
Well, because of the collateral damage too that comes into it, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And is there, I guess you just sparked another question that I didn't have right. Is there any similarity to what your patient shared with you is with people that have nervous breakdowns that, once you get through, hopefully you find the right therapist, get on whatever, the right medication, whatever helps you get stabilized. Are they ever the same? Is that an example of we don't know how we're going to get together, or is it totally two different scenarios and you can't compare the two?
Well, I think the difficulty in comparing them to is that if somebody has the nervous breakdown, the psychotic break with reality, where they're believing things to be real that aren't real, thinking true that aren't true, that's a much more substantial neurologic damage. Okay. You okay over there? Yeah. All right. So that's a much different damage than the psychological damage from isolation. but the issue is the same. The damage is different, but the issue is the same, which is how do we return them to their pre-morbid state so that their life is, back on track as they knew it.
And then moving into, I guess this could compare it to any situation, I'm worried about the family. And a lot of people come to me and they say, what type of family care, self-care could be put together as a coping strategy? I guess we could use anything from any mental health issue has the collateral damage with the family. I call it like if I'm addicted to my medications, it's a family disease. It's not just my disease. It affects my mother, my father, everybody surrounding around me, friends, family, relationships. Is when someone's going through a crisis who's mentally I guess mentally ill or going through a mental health point, and how does the family, is there any coping skills that they could do to take care of themselves so they don't drag down, especially if they're at an older age? Like, look at me, I'm 50 years old. My father's like in his mid 70s. So it's a lot more stress for him to deal. And he's always tells me, don't worry about me, I'll take care of myself and this and that. But I know it weighs a toll on him. So is there any care that be put in? One of our previous psychologists, Dr. Kelly Evison, she said that you can't think of it as like a plane crash. If the plane's going down, you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on the next person, because you can't help the next person unless you're taking care of yourself. So she used that analogy. Do you have any different type of analogy or I guess coping skills, a brand one for parents, or not even parents, relationships?
Well, I think her analogy is good. It's been used a lot, and it's something we all know about because we've all flown on an airplane. We've all heard the flight attendant say, the mask drops down, put it on yourself first so you can help. Because if you're not reasonably well and healthy, you really aren't of much use to other folks, right? So how does the mother, the father, the grandmother, the grandfather, how do they stay healthy if their grandson or son is a drug addict or an alcoholic? I mean, if I understand your question, is how do those folks take care of themselves while still caring about their family member who's got a substantial problem? Well, this might sound a little odd, but if you were my son, or if I were in your father's shoes, to make it personal, because you and your father have let me meet each of you, your struggles are your struggles. They're not his struggles. He doesn't have the privilege of the distress at your struggles that you have over your struggles, because they're your struggles. So it's a little bit of a boundary break. If my son has a physical illness and is seriously in a hospital, and I take to my bed because my son's seriously ill in a hospital, well, it's not my illness. I don't get the privilege of taking myself to bed. It's his illness, right? I also don't get the privilege, although your father would take it and I would take it if it were offered to me, to actually have the illness. Give the illness to me. My shoulders are broader. Give the illness to me. I'm older. I might have a strategy that you don't have. Or just give the terminal disease to me, because I've already lived a lot of my life and you've got a lot of your life to live. But we don't have that privilege. It's not our illness. It's not our disease. And so the big coping strategy is to respect that this is not my illness. My coping strategy is to stay as well as I can, to coach from the sidelines if I'm invited into the game, but it's not my illness. Therefore, it's not my game to be played, and I don't get to call the plays. I just get to be there to be available for support. Now, I have to show up to be available for support, but I also have to keep my nose out of it. It's not my game. Okay.
Is there a boundary, or like maybe you as an advisor, as a professional, where you say that, all right, if it's a child, I could be more proactive in intervention and go there. But if someone's 21, 27, my age, you know, you got to respect the age element to intervene. Is there a rule?
Well, clearly, if they're a dependent child, they don't get to have the full, privilege of making decisions for themselves that might hurt themselves.
Mm.
On the other hand, we should say, does a 30-year-old, if that 30-year-old wants to drink him or herself to death, is that their right? Is that their privilege? Well, it might be, but I would step in because I would say it's the alcohol making the decision, not a clear mind. I'm going to get them clear-headed. And if they're going to be mad at me, they can be mad at me. But I regard this as a matter of life and death. And so I'm not going to let them make their own choice. I'm making it for them. And fortunately, we have, the courts will intercede on our behalf. Other professionals will intercede. When someone seems to be self-destructive, right, self-destroying, we'll stop that. We don't want them to destroy themselves just because they think it's the right thing to do. Now, at some point, right, with you still have the privilege of deciding if you don't want to live you don't want to make it to Christmas. You decide you want to check out before Christmas. It'd be pretty hard to assign a watchdog to you, right, chain you to your bedpost and keep you from doing that. You'd find a way to do it. I'd prefer to talk to you about why is it important to do it before Christmas? Why can't we wait until Thanksgiving next year, right? Let's see what can happen, right? So my style. My style is to say, why cancel a future that you don't know? We don't know what's going to happen a week from now or 3 months from now. So let's try to make this. Let's look further out than yesterday, right? Let's look further out.
I guess it's hard for maybe this question to be translated or for the audience to understand, but since it is a topic, when I was talking about suicide and we had a very open, honest, trusting conversation about it, you stated to me that even no matter how bad I was at, you were compassionate, but you said, it's not your time yet. You told me that. Does that come from I respected it coming from you as a professional, but maybe a friend of mine would say the same thing because they wanted me around and I trusted you. I really believed that. I don't know if you would say, oh, it is your time, Paolo, go jump off a bridge. But you said that when you said that, it struck me a little bit because it made me say, okay, the man I respect your advice so much. And if he says it's not my time, even though how bad I feel, it's maybe, I got to follow my coach and you'll let me know. Does that come through a good psychologist training and knowing that, or is that just your style? Does that just come with your experience and that's who Dr. Bourne is,
Well, I can't speak for other psychologists, so there may have been some psychologists that have said that same sentence to someone. I don't know. You've heard me say, I make a deal. I can't be with people if I'm not going to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be, I don't ever want someone to think of me as being unkind or discourteous or unprofessional or mean-spirited. But I've said some things to folks that they've not been happy to hear. And I've said, I don't think you're going to enjoy hearing this, but I have to tell you this or that. And sometimes it's telling them that what they're thinking, I think they've misconstrued in terms of a disagreement with another person or relationship struggle. And they've given me the background. And to me, I add it up and it doesn't add up the way they added it up. And I think I'm compelled to tell them that. When you told me that you didn't want to live any longer, it didn't look like it was your time. When you said it and the way even though the history supports that, well, almost anybody at that position, had they had the experiences you've had through your life, might have had a similar thought. I think if I had thought it was your time, I would have just been quiet because it's not my place to sort of give you permission, kind of, so to speak. This is a decision. If you've come to it, you've come to it, and you don't need my blessings for it. I would probably have, I don't know now, I'm just trying to think. I probably would have just been quiet. But it did not seem like it was your time. It seemed like there was a lot more that, because of who you are and what you've done, there was just a lot more that you wanted to do. You just weren't quite sure what it was yet. Either one of us knew what it was yet.
Right.
And also with many people who are suicidal, they're pretty sure that the future is going to be a replication of today or yesterday. They really don't see that there's going to be much different. And so if I ask them, right, to try to make tomorrow just like today, of course, it's impossible. I can't make my tomorrow be just like today, but I'm going to schedule a meeting with you and we're going to have the exact same conversation. I mean, it won't happen.
Right.
Life is so dynamic, to feel as if every day is going to be Groundhog Day is just kind of foolish. But let's say it does feel like Groundhog Day. We've all seen that movie, with the Bill Murray in it, and it just repeats itself and repeats itself. It's a great film psychologically because he's the only guy who can shift it. Everybody else's day is the same. His day changes, but he's stuck with everybody being the same to him until something happens. What happens is he becomes authentic. He becomes real. He actually does real life. He doesn't just walk through life. He lives life. It's a cool movie. It's a great movie. I've asked people to watch it a bunch of times because I think that there's all sorts of ways to learn about life. Movies is one way. Novels is a way. Having conversations with people like you is a way. There's all sorts of ways to learn about life.
Well, I thought you were going to use the example of What About Bob? Did you see that one with?
Yeah.
And that's how I always tread that boundary with you because I feel like I'm Bill Murray. And What About Bob? Because actually that brings up the other question that I had next in line is a relationship. I mean, you're so professional, you set the boundaries. And me as a patient, I mean, we've been together for some time now, working in the treatment and the COVID, took its place. And I tried to respect that boundary because, we think about ourselves and how much pain we have, but we might not think our doctor or our professional has a life outside of us. So I started feeling like I was, and I didn't get to share this with you yet, so this is almost first news to everybody, is I was worried about being codependent on you. I started feeling like a little bit of a relationship and not breaking a boundary with you. And I know you're a strong man, so you would always tell me, hey, look, Paolo, I said what I said, keep walking. I think you've done that to me on more than one occasion. And I love that about you. But how does a patient does the doctor set the boundaries, or does the patient can I always or as a patient, come and push and go and ask for things? Or is there when you get in therapy, is there a certain outline, or does it fall in a box? I mean, it confuses me, and I get that question brought up. And I was just, one of my friends was just here. He's seeing a psychologist now, and I tell him some tips to get the most out of the session that I've learned from working with you. So codependency, do you have to worry about that with a patient, and being care?
Well, it comes down to the personalities of the psychologist and the patient. In the world of psychology, we have that term, codependency. We also have the term positive transference and negative transference. It has to do with the relational variable between the patient and the doctor, and when it may become problematic. Because let's say if I began to look at you as I guess you're young enough, you could be my son. Let's say I begin to look at you as a son and started asserting certain privilege over you about, how you drive, how you park your car. You really should park your car differently, or whether or not this and that. This, if I became parental rather than therapeutic, we would have an issue, right? Let's say you were a different let's say you were a female, and I became parental, and your boyfriend brought you to an appointment, and I sort of didn't like the way the boyfriend dressed. And so I found a way later in a therapy session to say, I was wondering about you and Joey. Do you think he's really right for you? Well, that's clearly a boundary break, right? I mean, but I may not even realize it's a boundary break. I may think that I'm helping her to look better, to look to somebody who can be a better spouse for her, because I know what's good in spouses, because I'm a psychologist and I know relationship, blah, blah, blah. So I think to answer your question, really the professional, the burden is on him or her, right? The burden is on me. The burden isn't on you. You come in and you should want to get as much as you can get from the time that you spend with me. And the burden is on me to sort of say, Paolo, you really got to stop calling me at 7:30 a.m. I haven't had my coffee yet. I know you're anxious about your day, but our appointment's at 9. Stop calling me at 7:30 a.m.
Right.
That burden rests with me, not with you.
Okay.
All
right. Yeah, because I feel that, obviously at the beginning, we were both feeling, well, I was feeling you out. And I noticed as time was going on, and maybe it was coming from an athlete's point of view as like a coach and a mentor. And I don't think I ever had, it was almost like somebody that's maybe grew up without a father or something. And you look at it and say, wow, this guy impresses me. And he's such a role model to me. And a lot of the things that helps me get out of bed is the relationship I have with you. And sometimes I battle. I'm saying, you know what, that's not really being fair to Dr. Bourne, as my therapist is, he's got, his own problems like every human being outside of your practice. And if I'm at a bad point, and I battle with that sometimes about, how I share my feelings with you. And and that was actually some other people started saying that we got some emails, some questions, because I would try to improve the podcast. And they said, how close can I get with my doctor? How long? And I didn't really have the answer for that, I say, hey, doc, I love you, man. You're the best, you're a role model for me. And you make me some days, if I would think I'm doing the wrong thing, it's not maybe if I'm taking care of Paolo, it's like, I feel like I would be disrespecting our relationship of the time you have invested in me. And I don't know if that's a healthy behavior pattern.
Well, I wouldn't want you to be burdened by our relationship. So if our relationship causes you to somehow want to do things differently, that's positive and good for you, how great, right? I mean, that's wonderful. But that would be almost like any relationship that mattered to you. You would probably want your father to think well of you, your mother, your cousin, whomever, Alex. And so that's not a problem in a professional relationship that we want the other person to necessarily think well of us. What becomes a problem if we want them to think well of us so much that we're not willing to tell them what the negative features of our day or week or our thoughts are, right? Because sometimes we won't tell our best friend something that seems a little sketchy in our head because we don't want that best friend to look at us sideways when we're out fishing or playing golf. But we can tell our therapist because we're probably not going to be out fishing and playing golf with them. And if we are, we trust the therapist to put it in the context of they know me. They know that's just one piece of who I am, but our relationship is so, gosh, I don't want to use, I was going to say so pure. It's not pure. That's not what it is. It's just that it is different. When somebody comes into my office, I've never met them. They've never met me. And typically within 15 to 20 minutes, we're talking about some pretty serious personal matters. Well, that doesn't happen at a cocktail party. It doesn't usually happen at playing golf with somebody, right? So all of a sudden, the boundaries, the parameters of this relationship, the fact that it's special, are in full view. It's evident. In 15 minutes, I'm talking about things that I haven't even told my wife or my mother, or my father, or my brother, or my best friend. I'm talking to a stranger about things that really matter, right? Right. So you can always talk to that person if the relationship is good about what really matters. You can also talk to them about things that matter less.
Right.
That's what makes it kind of special.
Okay, that's good. All right, and I guess the last two questions to sum up today's chapter is this one came through when Dr. Bourne, when you were in the CIA, what were the most common questions that you had to address or issues opposed to your private practice and coping skills that you use that you feel comfortable about talking about? And so I guess everybody's interested about the CIA. That was the hot topic with you. I got so many that we don't even want to go into. So they wanted to know, I guess, like what type of cases you would be assigned that you could talk about, and opposed to now private practice, like where you're helping people like myself, you know?
Right. So I think the safest, broadest answer is to say that my work has always been about helping someone do what they do better.
Safe.
If they're a mother, to help them in their role with their adolescent children, with their 3-year-old. If they're a father, if they're a husband, to help them be a better husband so they don't have the conflicts with their spouse. If they're an agent, if their job is to recruit folks to be informants, it's to help them do that in the best way we can, you know, as the old saying goes, to protect America from her enemies, right? My tasks were always to help people do whatever they were doing or want to do, is to do it better or to do it as well as they can do it. And if I have anything to offer to help that along, that's my task.
Wow. 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 So like with me, if you use me as an example, like whatever the problems I'm facing that day, you take it on case by case, correct? Like if I'm dealing with pain and I can't get through the breakthrough of the pain, or simply like my goal is to be a better man every day. You know, maybe you could give me some examples in our session. I could ask the therapist that and they could answer it. Is that just your style? Again, you can't speak for every psychologist out there, but is that a pretty much safe place for people to go with their therapist?
Yeah, I think pretty much any mental health professional, psychologist, psychotherapist, counselor, et cetera, social worker, I would say pretty much all of them view their job, their responsibility to the patient is to help this patient live life differently than they're living it currently. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in front of them. So you're here with me because something isn't going as well as you want it to go. Your marriage, your job, your child rearing, your anxiety, you know, your ability to fly on an airplane, your whatever it is. You're here because something isn't going as well as you want it to go. So let's talk about that something. Let's talk about you, and let's find ways to help you make that something go better, right? And again, with the CIA, some of what is done is very straightforward human intelligence gathering. I mean, it's spying, but it's straightforward. You spy. How do you spy? Most people spy the same way, et cetera. Some of what happens behind closed doors. Some of what happens right out in front. The CIA is a large organization. They have managers, they have directors, they have what we would consider vice presidents, executive directors of this and that and this and that, different titles. But you can think of it as any large organization, right? And so let's say one of those people in one of those positions is supervising a lot of other people doing something else, and they're having trouble supervising those people. Well, they might see someone me and say, how do I supervise this big thug named Paolo? He's smart, he's capable, and I can't get the son of a bitch to do this or that. Do you have any ideas, right? So I might be helping them help you so that you can do what you're supposed to do better than you've been doing it, right? So
Clarify that I haven't been that. I followed your direction to the T.
yeah, but you don't know how many people I have to talk to get me to know how to help you.
Now, the other thing too is this is probably, they both have different reward systems. Did you find working for the CIA? The question is, did you find working for the CIA more rewarding personally, opposed to being or having your own private practice? Because I guess private practice, you get to choose your patients. Is that my understanding? Or CIA, they assign you to this? I don't know that answer.
I am, unfortunately, I think I am a member of a small group. I wish the group were really large, but I'm a member of a group that has thoroughly enjoyed everything I've ever done. I liked being at a university and on a faculty and teaching young adults. I loved working for the agency for all those years and doing a variety of different things. I like my private practice. thoroughly enjoy every bit of all of what I've done.
Wow, that's awesome. How many people could say that, huh?
I wish the number were huge, because
Yeah.
it's good to be able to really enjoy what you do. And I think you're in that group. Now, you've paid a heavy price for some of what you've done, physically, and probably not mentally in terms of brain damage, but probably emotionally, sort of mentally. And so therein is a little bit of a rub. I mean, I've never had second thoughts about anything I've done as a psychologist in private practice or as a psychologist working in a university setting. There are times when you have to be comfortable with sort of the kind of an even awkward thing for me to be able to say out loud, but when what you're doing, you may not want put on the front page of a newspaper, but you know it's a good and right thing to do. And if it's good and right, then why wouldn't you be happy with it being publicized? Because that's going to square the deal. The deal is not going to get done if it's understood and known. But it's important for the deal to be made. It's important for long term for this action to take place. And yet I don't really want to tell people I'm part of that action. Right. So that's a difference.
Yeah, but at the same time, if we're not open and honest and transparent, I mean, there's a lot of things that I've shared through this campaign that, I mean, truly, you know, I guess at this stage, I could say, all right, we don't know what's happening, but we see where the direction's going with my life. I could hide that, you know, but I don't think I'd be able to help people if I wasn't transparent about, you know, saying, listen, I had problem with opiates. You know, I had to get off them. You know, a lot of people, there's that stigma. You know, my UCR, my father really just never could understand it. And I'm so much pain. So, you know, talking about suicide, you know, it's very difficult to open up and share outside in the open realm, you know, but how are we supposed to help Mrs. Smith or Mr. Smith or little Joey and people paying it forward if we don't get the word and we're honest with people and transparent, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I guess. And then the last one is, I'll let you take it as long as you want. Question is that what are the most common things that problems that your patients come into you right now that you see as maybe a shift in the last decade, that, and how are they, or are they coping, or are you giving them to balance through the tough times through your, I guess, practice, or I guess generic through your experience, how you've seen it go? Did I phrase that correctly?
Well, I'm not quite sure if the question is, are the issues, the troubles that people have, are they different now than they were 10 years ago? What am I seeing more of or more prevalent now than I saw a decade ago? Is that sort of the question?
Yeah, that is. Yeah, like what we gave our apprenticeship program, our psych students, majors, is find 10 of the most problems that different demographics are facing, whether it's schools, you know, male, female, or whatever it is. What are the main pain points that we're seeing come right to a head right now, where people need to get help and advice on? So does anything like that come across your desk more so? Because your practice is very broad because of your experience.
Right. So, you know, it used to be said that depression was sort of the common cold of mental health issues, right? If you ask most internal medicine docs, what do most people come in to see them for? They're going to say a cold, a viral infection, or sometimes a body ache or pain that they don't really understand. Okay. So one day, so you give me a couple of minutes here. So I was on the medical ethics committee of the hospital, and I'm leaving a meeting, and one of the local primary care docs stops me in the hall at the hospital and says, Russell, can I chat with you for just a minute? I want to talk to you about, you know, stress-related illnesses and things, and just stress. Could I talk to you for a minute? And so we sort of ducked inside this little room that wasn't occupied, and I said, sure, but let me tell you that I only have 10 minutes. I got to get back to my office for an appointment. So what I'd prefer is that you make an appointment and we'll talk about stress. We'll talk about how it affects on physical health, and I'll do my best to be helpful. He goes, no, it's not me. I'm not talking about me. So let me explain the situation. And so I'll try to abbreviate this. He says, someone comes into my office and they have a neck ache, a back ache, or upset stomach, GI distress. And so, I examine them, and on physical exam, I palpate their neck, everything feels fine. I palpate their back, it feels fine. They don't have any radiculopathy pain during the leg. Their stomach seems fine. I don't palpate any little mass in the bowel. Everything seems fine on physical exam. But they have complaints. So we do the blood work, and I say, come back in 3 days, see if it's better. The blood work comes back. Everything's negative. All accounts are good. There's no reason to think that creatinine levels are high in the liver. There's any inflammation. Everything is fine. But they still have whatever it was that they showed up with. They still have their GI problem or their backache or their headache or their neck ache. And so we talk about it a little bit. And I can't come up with a diagnosis for them. And so I say, primary care doc says, I turn to them and I say, well, look, Mrs. Smith, do you think this could be stress? I mean, everything seems fine. Do you think it could be stress related? And he says, they give me a look. They look at me like, you low down snake in the grass. Who would think of saying so? What is wrong? They just give me a look like, go to hell. And then they just leave the office like they're unhappy to hear me. And I said, well, because what you've just said to them is, there's nothing really wrong with you. It's all in your head. That's what they heard. Now, that's not what you said, but that's what they heard. I said, so next time I want you to say this. You do the full exam, you've done everything, and then say to them, look, is there anything going on in your life right now that you really care about, but you don't seem to be able to make much difference in? I mean, it could be that your husband wants the promotion into full partner in the business, but he's probably not going to get it no matter how much you guys talk about it. Or Billy wants to make the baseball team, but no matter how many Saturday afternoons your husband throws the ball to him, he just can't hit. Or your daughter wants to be cheerleading, but no matter how many times she goes to the camp, she stumbles on she can't make the team. There's something you really care about, but no matter what you do, trying to help your other son learn his multiplication tables, but he just can't seem to get it. And you're worried about whether he's going to be promoted out of the second grade. No matter what you do, you don't seem to be able to make much difference. Is there anything like that going on in your life? And she's going to tell you. She's going to say, yes, my mother's dying, or my father's dying, or my son's failing out of school, or my little kid can't read. She's going to tell you. And then you're going to say, right, well, so usually that level of stress can settle in the body, can cause a headache, or maybe we need to talk to you. And they won't look at you like you've accused them of something. You'll explain to them what stress can do to a body.
And at that time, you're actually diffusing the stigma of, like, if they think they're being pigeonholed or they're being put down, right? Wow, that's great. Yeah.
But what he says to me, Paolo, is he says, yeah, I'm not going to take all that much time to do that. I'm just going to send them to you. And I said, well, that you're messing it up, right? That's not what I'm asking you to do. I want you to explain it to them. And then if they still want to talk with somebody else about it, they can come to me. Right?
Right.
So to answer the question of what do I see more of, I don't really see more depression than I've ever seen. I don't see more anxiety than I've ever seen. I see people who don't feel well, and their physician has told them there's nothing wrong with you. And when we go over what's going on in their life, they've got a mountain of stress. So in all likelihood, glucocorticoids are high, the norepinephrine's being released all the time. They've got great muscle tension. They are suffering from stress-related dysfunction. And we have to talk about how we're going to manage some of that stress. And again, whether it's stress of a bad marriage, stress of a poor academically performing student, stress of their own life, they're not what they wanted to be at age 41. They don't have children at age 43. They don't have grandchildren at age 65, and all their friends have grandchildren, whatever it is. And some of those things seem pretty minor and inconsequential, but it's creating stress in this person's life, and enough stress that they're developing physical symptoms, right? That's the point.
Now, I know you're a big reader and you're always learning, and one of the great examples. And I don't know if you remember it, but I'm sure you do. Is you shared the one video? I think I was having a hard time putting my feelings into words and communicating with others, and you really didn't even give me a coping skill. You pulled up nail in the head video, and I was just like, I wanted to hug you because it summed up. You got what I did with ever even explaining the words, the video. It just connected, and it was so gratifying just to put in. I laughed, and it was so amazing. So when you said stress is a big topic, and of course every family has a different situation. Is since you're a big reader and we don't have time to really go into all the coping skills because they can vary. Is there any books that you recommend dealing with stress that to the public that you would say, hey, this was something like the video you brought up to my attention? Because that was I passed that on to so many people, and everyone's laughed and got such a great kick out of it.
Right. Yeah, it's a funny video. I think it's marvelous when people can be that clever, right? I mean, it's just really done very well. I don't have a favorite book on stress or relaxation that I can say. I'm sure somebody's got a favorite.
Go to the librarian and ask the librarian.
Or just ask your viewers, right? The people who are viewing the podcast. Say, look, if you enjoyed this podcast, we have in addition to sending us $25, how about sending us the name of 2 books that really were useful or helpful to you in life? And see what
Beautiful. So you heard it here from Dr. Russell A. Bourne that we would request that if anybody has some great coping skills and some books that have helped them get through a tough time with dealing with stress, please send it in and post it at the bottom of this video. And Dr. Bourne has been so generous with his time. We're going to wrap it up because he's got to start wrapping his presents for Christmas and the holiday. And wish you and your family the best holiday season, and hopefully 2021 gets better for all of us. And thank you so much, Doc, for being in my corner and being in the audience's corner and being a truly compassionate and solid man. And
I appreciate it. It's very nice of you to say. Thanks, Paolo.
All right, Doc. Have a good day.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Paolo's podcast. This concludes all 3 segments with Dr. Bourne. Make sure to tune in next week, February 3rd, with our new guest speaker, Marsha Martino, at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As of 2021, CPMHA has launched a new charity GoFundMe, and we strongly encourage all viewers to consider donating. Please consider helping us reach our campaign goals, as all proceeds go towards funding our company and into forming our programs and operations to give those in need access to free resources for coping skills and connections to get them through this national health crisis. The charity GoFundMe link will be posted in the description of all future streaming platform videos. Thank you, and don't forget to check out our company website, cpmha.com. And remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell in order to receive notifications each time we post a new podcast.